What was your reaction when you received orders to come back home? What was your reaction?
Well, I was just happy. That's what I lived for, was to go home. I'd had all of it I wanted, and a couple of years, I don't know how long I was over there. It's over 2 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to be back home doing what I wanted to do rather than what somebody else wanted me to do.
Tell me about your boat trip over to the Pacific, and then tell me about the boat trip coming back home.
The one going over?
The one going over and the one coming home.
Well, we were on a Holland ship named Kota Agoan. And they hauled cattle in this ship in peacetime in Holland. And we got on that thing and rode 31 days from San Francisco to Guinea Island. That's Port Moresby, New Guinea is about where we unloaded it. But Guinea Island is just offshore at Portland, at Port Moresby.
What about your boat trip coming home?
My boat trip coming home, yeah, we loaded on this raft kind of a deal, and we could went out among the ships, and we'd pass this ship and that one and that one, and they were all unloaded, and so the propellers were sticking out of the water because they were not loaded. And when they get loaded, while they go down, the propeller goes down in the water. And here came up the lure line, and it was a passenger ship from Los Angeles to Honolulu in peacetime, a beautiful ship. And I got a stateroom, and two other men stayed with me, and we occupied that all the way home. But anyway, they were trying to get a bunch of soldiers home, and everybody wanted to come home, so they had soldiers on the top deck, and they were going to sleep up there that night, and it was wintertime, January, and so they headed the ship straight south to get into a warmer climate, and we went down to equal with San Francisco, and then we headed straight into San Francisco, and when we reached San Francisco, which was 12 days, they headed straight north, and we went to Puget Sound, and into Puget Sound, which is, I think, 80 miles. And then we anchored right there close. And I walked the streets of Seattle for 8 days. Then on the 8th day, they backed the ship out, and we went down to Olympia. And from Olympia, we unloaded off the ship and carried everything we had to Fort Lewis, Washington. And that's about the size of it.
Okay. Tell me about your trip home from Fort Lewis to Fort Logan, where you were discharged.
We got on the train at Fort Lewis and traveled down to Colorado. And as we were going into Colorado, our train had to pull off onto a siding to let another train pass. And First Lieutenant jumped off the train as we were stopped and ran across the tracks over into town and bought a case of beer and was bringing it back to the train as we were pulling away. And some of the soldiers, they hollered at the conductor, ho, 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 stop the train. And he did stop the train, and this first lieutenant got on the train.
What did he do with the beer? Did he share? Did he share the beer?
What?
Did he share the beer?
Not with me. I wasn't a beer drinker anyway.
Okay. Now, eventually you made it to Fort Logan, Colorado.
Yeah.
And there you were discharged. Tell me about your trip from Fort Logan, Colorado to Wichita, Kansas.
Well, I was discharged January the 9th, I believe it was, and it's cold in Colorado in January, and Fort Logan is at the edge of Denver, which was kind of out in the country and nothing around us but camp. Anyway, no motels, no nothing. But anyway, I was discharged at 5 o'clock in the evening, along with 1,000 other men, I suppose. Well, where are you going to sleep at night? Everything was loaded. The trains were loaded, the motels were loaded, and the buses were loaded. So, in the process while I was walking around there, and there was some civilian came up and he said, where are you guys going? I said, well, I'm going to Wichita. And he said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take, if you get 5 men, I'll take you all to Wichita for $25 apiece. And he said, there's my car over there. It's 1940 Model Ford, I believe it was, with no radio or heater in the thing. And in those days, that was the selling point. Well, that car's got a radio and a heater. Well, they didn't have a heater in this car. But anyway, we rode all night. Well, he said, I want to stop by the house. Well, I'm sure he took this $125 and gave it to his wife or somebody, so we wouldn't rob him on the road home, which I wouldn't think about doing it anyway. But we rode all night long in that Ford, stopping here and there to get a gas, and pulled into Wichita at 6 o'clock in the morning at the bus station. Well, I had $3 left, I suppose. That's what I had out of the $28 that I received. So I hired a taxi to take me to my sister's place in North Wichita. And lo and behold, we pulled into my sister's house, and there was my mother on the back porch. She was dusting the tablecloth off, and she looked over and saw us, and that's where I met my mother. She was taking care of my sister who had just freshly had a new baby, and she was there taking care of my sister, but she didn't know I was coming home. Or she knew I was coming, but she didn't know where I was at. Mm-hmm. They let us send a telegram for thousands of miles out in the ocean to your family, notifying them that you were on the road home. And there's no telephones or no communication of any kind. And my folks didn't have electricity. They didn't have radios or didn't have telephones. And whenever nighttime fell, we had kerosene lights we lit up. I went to work for Conoco at Wichita and was transferred to Palco from Conoco. And in my work with Conoco, I was driving vehicles and had them have them serviced, and I had them serviced in Palco, and Aaron Clark was had a filling station in town, and he would service my vehicles. And one day we was talking, and he was telling about his trip from Washington to Denver, and telling about a soldier jumping off the train and going across the tracks and getting a case of beer. And well, I said that was a coincidence that I remember that. I said I was standing on the back of that train as he was loading as he stopped the train to load him up. And so Aaron Clark, his son married my daughter, Rita, and his son's name was Ivan. And they have 3 children and live in Colorado.
Okay, thank you, Harold, for your interview and for your stories about World War II and the Pacific Theater. Thank you.